Greetings, denizens of the night, and welcome to Fangs After Dark. Tonight, I'm actually going to be delving into the world of Mage The Ascension once again, even though technically it's all within the same world of darkness. But tonight I'm going to be covering the topic of Magick in Mage The Ascension, a very, very nuanced topic to talk about. There is a lot of things going on with Magick in Mage The Ascension, a lot of interpretations, a lot of everything. But I'm going to be really going over the general building blocks of what Magick is, how everyone understands it from a meta perspective, and some in-game narrative perspectives as well. I'm not going to be going into detail on the exact levels for every sphere in the Magick system. That will be its own separate video because every level for every sphere is a topic all unto itself. But I will be going over the basics. It's still going to be a pretty chunky boy, so strap yourselves in, for Magick is what makes the world go round. Magick in Mage The Ascension can be a very nuanced thing. It can be derived by the many differing paradigms that exist within all mages, and therefore it can take many different forms. What Magick might be to one mage isn't the same for another mage. It would be incorrect to compare Enlightened Magick to powers such as Vampiric Disciplines or the gifts of the Garu. Enlightened Magick is something wholly different, and in many cases, more potent. There is a reason why other night folk tend to stay out of the way of mages. They may be squishy mortals, but that doesn't mean they can't turn you into a lawn chair. On a meta level, there is a unifying system to comprehend the Magick in Mage The Ascension. While in-game characters may perceive this system in a unique way, fundamentally all Magick works the same way whether you're a priest of a holy order, or a classically trained wizard in hermetic arts, or a super scientist trying to create your own Frankenstein creature. Magick is categorized into 9 spheres. Spheres meaning all-encompassing. These spheres describe the 9 different facets of reality that a mage can control. You can think of these spheres and the aspects as the building blocks of what make up the universe, essentially. I'm going to give you a brief description of the 9 spheres, as going into detail for each of them would be extremely time-consuming all in one video. Let me know if you want me to go into more detail on the spheres in other videos, and I will gladly do so. We have the sphere of correspondence, the sphere that encompasses the space connection and or distances between two people, places, or things. Think about the space aspect of space-time. This covers things like teleportation, transportation, or even space travel. Then you have entropy. This sphere governs the aspects of fate and death, essentially. The cycle of all things, order, luck, chaos, and destiny. You want to know exact probability of beating the house at the MGM Grand in Vegas? This is your sphere. Then you have forces, the fun one. They're all really fun, but everyone likes forces. This is the sphere of energy, essentially. This governs all of the aspects of energetic patterns that are in the universe, like heat, cold, electricity, gravity, kinetic energy, light energy, sound, vibrations, radiations, elemental forces, and all of that stuff. You want to be the next Avatar? This is your sphere. Then you have life. This sphere is exactly what it sounds like. You have the ability to affect life patterns. Living things are complex, but the life sphere lets you do a great many things, such as body enhancements, healing, morphing into completely different creatures, controlling plants, and at high levels, extending life beyond their natural time. Then you have the matter sphere. This also is pretty straightforward, as it is the sphere that controls inorganic matter. Transmuting lead into gold, making a bridge out of stone, turning some inorganic substance into another inorganic substance, getting a feel for the structure of things. Hell, even creating brand new things of matter at super high levels like, you know, unobtainium or orichalcum or something like that. At even higher levels, you can just do some crazy things with matter. Full Metal's Philosopher's Stone ain't got nothing on an Archmage of the Matter Sphere. Then you have Mind. This sphere isn't as cut as dry as the spheres that affect patterns directly, patterns meaning like physical things, but it is still straightforward because with Mind, you can literally affect the mind. The biggest or the best way to describe the Mind Sphere would be like the dominate discipline in Vampire the Masquerade. I know I said that magic isn't exactly like other powers, but some of them do cross over, and dominate is one of those things. You could also think of it as a combination of dominate and presence, because with the Mind Sphere, you can essentially affect the thought patterns of people, of consciousness, sentient creatures, you know, telepathy, memories, instincts. So you can even use it to affect animals. At higher levels, you can even create your own thinking consciousness out of nowhere, like a magical AI of sorts, or you can even transplant your own consciousness into different hosts if you really have the means to do so. Pull off an Emperor Palpatine, if you know what I mean. Then you have the Prime Sphere. This sphere is what you could call the foundation of all magic, the base at which all magic is built from, or the doorway in which all other aspects of magic must walk through before they're realized intentionally or otherwise. This is the sphere of raw magic. A lot of people have a hard time kind of grasping this sphere because it's not as tied to, you know, real things as some other ones are, but the primordial energy of creation and reality is something that this sphere lets you control. It can be a bit daunting to get a grasp on it, but it's really not that bad despite the grandiose description. You could also see this as the sphere of high fantasy. This is the sphere you want if you want to enchant or create magical items, create wards of protection, sense magical entities or effects, supernatural creatures, harness the power of Quintessence, which is the Mage The Ascension's version of mana, to greater degrees, resisting paradox, which by now you should know a little bit about, because paradox is a really big thing, and creating other aspects out of nothing in conjunction with other spheres, like being able to create a fireball out of nowhere, or create a lightning bolt out of your hand or something. Or you can literally just cast Magic Missile, like literally Magic Missile, which I think everybody wants to try to do at least once. Then you have the sphere of spirit. And spirit is also pretty straightforward because it allows the mage to have access to the spirit world, the penumbra, the umbras, access to being able to influence ghosts and spirits and things of that nature that exist within the Umbra itself, otherworldly entities. Though the biggest caveat here is that there are wholly different rules that govern those entities in other realms, and while the spirit sphere may allow you to interact with them and have some modicum of control over them, the chances of a mage being wholly powerful in the Umbra is very low. So be very careful when you use the spirit sphere, because you could find yourself in a place where you don't want to be. The sphere after that is time. And this is also a sphere that is pretty straightforward because it allows you to control time, but it is extremely risky. The use of time in many forms, from always knowing exactly what time it is, slowing down time to dodge bullets, or just timing things to beat every red light on Main Street. When you start messing with the greater flow of time, like trying to go into the past or going to the future, that's when things get really, really risky, because you risk losing yourself in the time stream. Because when a mage uses that level of time, they are essentially removing themselves from the time flow just to be able to peruse around it, and that is always a risky endeavor. And those were essentially the 9 spheres. Like I said, I can go into a hell of a lot more detail on them, but I won't do that unless people want those videos, because that is a lot of time. But one nice thing to remember is that these 9 spheres are connected in a sort of cycle, in a way. And what the cycle itself is worded in a very specific way. Prime, which creates a conception of the mind, which gives focus to create spirit, which is given form by forces, matter, and life, which is perceived by correspondence and time, which gives way to decay to entropy, which causes everything to return to prime. And in this little pseudo-poem explains the cycle of the 9 spheres, which are the building blocks of the universe and reality. As a bonus, most of the traditions believe that there is a 10th sphere and that it represents unity, one of the few concepts not represented in the other 9 spheres. As a matter of fact, there was an actual plot point within the meta plot of Mage The Ascension that the Council of 9, they had a 10th seat for guests, and the symbol of the 3rd or the 10th sphere showed up randomly on that 10th seat, which caused a lot of uproar, which is interesting. And another fun fact, Mage the Awakening split entropy into 2 separate spheres of death and fate, which I think is perfectly reasonable to do it to make things more interesting at your table if you want to do that. But that's up to you. And then on another humorous point, there are 2 other spheres that are kind of like an inside joke within the mage community, which is the sphere of gun, which all mortals possess because bullets will still delete a mage, and the sphere of cocaine, because drugs are a hell of a thing. So don't underestimate an angry hunter hopped up on crack looking to purge the neighborhood witch because she put a hex on her dog. And those were the 9 spheres of Magick. But wait, there's more. We're not done yet. We need to talk about Quintessence, which I mentioned when I was talking about the Prime Sphere. Quintessence, as I said before, is literally just the mana source for mages in Mage the Ascension. Anybody that's familiar with fantasy will understand mana as the energy that powers wizards, warlocks, sorcerers, all sorts of stuff for their magical abilities. A lot of these other fantasy properties or whatever don't get too deep into the what mana is. Quintessence, however, has a lot deeper meaning in Mage the Ascension because Quintessence, which literally means 5th element or 5th essence, quint and essence, is literally the building block energy of the universe. Things that exist can only exist because Quintessence is there to flow into all of these patterns, matter, life, all sorts of stuff. It is the unknowable, unseeable energy that makes up all living things. Like the Force in Star Wars, essentially. And mages use that to power their magic. It's flowing everywhere. There are places on Earth where Quintessence flows even more freely that are known as nodes. And mages tend to congregate around these nodes because it makes them more powerful. It makes them able to do more magical stuff. Werewolves actually will congregate on these nodes because they see them as cairns, places of spiritual power. And that can bring mages and werewolves into conflict. But other than that, that's what Quintessence essentially is. And it's actually something that was studied in real history as the 5th element, the building blocks of the universe. Like Aristotle made mention of these things in his writings. And it's also known as Aether, which is a term used by the Sons of Ether in, Mage the Ascension as one of the science-oriented traditions. They call it Aether, and then the technocracy itself they'll call Quintessence primal energy because they understand it as primal energy. It pretty much is primal energy, but that's just narrative differences in what people call things. At the end of the day, it's all the same shit for every mage, no matter what they are or who they are. It's the stuff that powers their magic. Quintessence can take on a physical form, though. Even though it is an unknowable, untouchable energy that flows through all things, it does sometimes manifest in a physical form. Most likely it will manifest at a node, and it will usually take the form of some coincidental object that fits in the environment of wherever that node is. So like it could manifest as like a ring of mushrooms, like a fairy circle in some sort of Everglade, or it will manifest as the long lost sock to one of your pairs that you've lost long ago in the laundry if the node happens to be, in your laundry room or in a laundromat, which, is possible because nodes just happen to be wherever. And then there's also a lot of speculation within the world of darkness itself that ley lines happen to be like more concentrated streams or corridors or hallways of quintessence where it flows more intensely. And people can tap into these ley lines to get greater power and greater effect on things. TAS allows mages to be able to use more quintessence that they're naturally able to do so on their own to be able to supercharge their magic. Cabals, or groups of mages, can use TAS or gathered quintessence in a node to be able to power powerful rituals that take a long time to do, that has a great effect that no one singular mage could ever do on their own. Quintessence is extremely important, and every mage vies for it in one way or another. So by now you're probably thinking that the Magick in Mage the Ascension is a little OP from the sounds of it, right? How have mages not taken over the world of darkness if they literally have the power to control reality? Well, just because the power that mages potentially could possess is almost infinite, that doesn't mean that there aren't limitations. And there are two big limitations that keep mages from becoming the supreme rulers of everything. And that is reality itself through something called paradox, and the human mind that comprises a mage's psyche. These two things limit mages in their magic in very big ways, both in a meta perspective through game mechanics and in a narrative perspective. So let's start with paradox. In my previous mage video, if you haven't watched that, link it down below, I talked a bit about consensus and how the mass belief of sleepers, or mortals, shapes the reality in which our world of darkness presides, the rules of reality. This belief is firmly rooted in the idea that supernatural things can't exist and don't exist. People can't just throw fireballs from their hands. They can't just teleport out of nowhere, turn into the Hulk, or turn lead into gold. This belief limits mages in how they can do their magic because reality is watching. When a mage does something that exceeds the normal person's ability to rationalize what they've witnessed, the mage incurs what is known as paradox, a paradoxical action to the rules of reality. This phenomenon is reality's way of keeping things real, so to speak. Or you can think about it as like a rubber band that's snapping back at the mages for pulling on it too hard. The more outlandish magic a mage does, the more paradox they incur, and eventually the mage will suffer what is referred to as a paradox backlash, where reality punishes the mage in some way for fucking around with magic a little too hard. Backlash itself can manifest in a few ways, like causing direct damage in some way, such as a spell malfunctioning, or more subtle ways like getting clipped by a car randomly. It can manifest magical flaws or afflictions from trivial to completely drastic, like seeing shadows bend at odd angles, or people's faces kind of misshapen or, spinning around. Everything to their skin becoming as rigid as stone for a while, or parts of their bodies like withering away. Backlash could manifest in full-blown paradox spirits, where a completely physically manifested incarnation of paradox comes down to do something to you. They can do anything as minor from being just a nuisance to being a full-blown assailant. And in the most extreme cases of backlash, you could be sucked into a paradox realm that is comprised of whatever fun stuff of the sphere that you use to get that paradox, or you could even just blinked out of existence for being that much of a douche with your magic. But at the end of the day, paradox is one of the more overt limiting factors for mages' magic. They can't just go honk wild with it because reality will come back and do something about it. Reality is always watching. And even archmagi are very careful to tug on the strings of reality too hard, lest they incur the wrath of reality itself. Now, I could leave paradox at that with the description I've just given you, but I believe going into a little bit more depth with paradox is important because it does affect the way mages will perform their magic in the world. Paradox has a very, very big influence on how mages do their magic. Regarding paradox, when magic is cast, it is defined into three neat categories, essentially. Coincidental, magic that is cast in a subtle and obscure way behind a veil of mundanity that leads normal people into believing that what happened is possible, even if it is improbable. Vulgar, which is magic that is cast in a way that can only be rationalized as supernatural, even if sleepers aren't present. Remember that reality is always watching. And then you have vulgar with witnesses, which is essentially the same as vulgar magic, except you have an audience of regular normies peeping the show, which makes paradox a lot more likely and a lot more brutal. From a meta perspective, the magic that is cast is categorized into these three aspects. Some people actually refer to it this way in the narrative as well. But let's use the classic fireball as an example for these three paradoxical categories. The classic fireball cast, as seen in many fantasy depictions, would be considered vulgar. You are conjuring a ball of flame out of nowhere that you throw at something and then it explodes. That is a vulgar magical effect, since normal folk can't just do that. Even if you are alone, no one around but you an opportunity, casting magic like this will still be considered vulgar and paradox will come knocking. In the same vein, if you were to cast said fireball in such a way, but regular people were around to see it, that would be considered vulgar with witnesses. You have active, normal regulars watching you throw this explosive fireball, and while they might fight as they may to rationalize it in some way, there is no mistaking that something outlandish and crazy just happened, and paradox will really slap you in the face for trying to be so bold. And then you have the coincidental version of this thing. How would you make a fireball coincidental? That's where the creativity of magic comes to play for the player. Coming up with crafty ways to hide your magic is one of the funnest aspects of playing mage, and while we all love the high fantasy tropes that magic can provide, we must remember that we are in the world of darkness and things don't come easy or without consequence. The best way to make your magic coincidental is through utilizing the environment around you and normal objects at your disposal to try to make things seem like what just happened could happen. A regular fireball is wild and crazy, but what if you took a swig of whiskey and blew it out through a lit lighter? Or through a Molotov cocktail, but when it hits the target, it has a hell of a lot more explosive force and power behind it. It's still magic, but with a mundane filter. Something to keep in mind with coincidental magic, though, is what I like to call the stacking effect. If a mage casts too many coincidental effects in a short amount of time, reality will start noticing. Coincidence is only coincidence until a pattern emerges, and reality will start slapping you if you're zipping around through city streets trying to lose your tail at high speeds, all while happening to beat every single red light, all while your engine is on E and you blew a gasket 2 blocks ago. Some players might find the constant need for coincidental magic to be too cumbersome and annoying to deal with, and they would prefer a high fantasy style magic mage game, and that is perfectly fine. Do whatever is fun for you and your table. And the standards of what could be considered coincidental, vulgar, and vulgar with witnesses varies from table to table as well. And it also varies depending on location within the game world as well. Sanctums, which are like little pocket dimensions for mages, they will be attuned to specific mages, and their magic is coincidental in there. You have horizon realms and other aspects of reality, different planes and dimensions essentially, where magic will be less likely to be scrutinized by reality. So there's a lot of room to play around with when it comes to the paradoxical aspects of magic. So I suggest talking with the table and finding out what best fits and rolling with that. But overall, mages tend to try and utilize coincidental magic as much as possible to avoid paradox backlash. But sometimes overtly vulgar magic is necessary to overcome an obstacle, namely those of the supernatural variety. Other mages, constructs like hit marks, spirits, night folk such as vampires, werewolves, trying to get through wards, dealing with wraiths and spirits from the Umbra or abyssal entities or whatever, or magic disguised through technology. All this stuff is still going to need some overt magic to deal with. A mage will never incur vulgar with witnesses if casting magic in the presence of blatantly supernatural entities, so they tend to use vulgar magic quite often when dealing with this stuff. But as soon as the normies start mucking about, that's when paradox wants to come a knockin', or if mages start casting way too crazy of shit in whatever situation they're in, that paradox in reality has no way to really answer that except, hey, you're gonna get slapped, bro. So we've talked about paradox and the limitations that puts on a mage's ability to cast magic, but there are still other limiting factors that help keep a mage grounded, and that comes into the form of paradigm. I mentioned before that one of the limiting factors is the mage's mind itself. You have to remember that mages are literally just regular mortals that happen to awaken to the greater mysteries of the universe and realize that they can tug on the strings of reality to perform magic. But even when this happens, we as mages, or as regular people, have to rationalize how we can do this magic. Very rarely will we get somebody that just thinks they have this power because they're awesome. Every mage, for the most part, has a belief as to where this magic is coming from and how they have to use it. That is what a paradigm is. And that paradigm leads to foci, which are a collection of tools, rituals, and processes and practices that a mage uses to focus their magic. At its core, a paradigm is a principal assumption about how the world works. Very rarely will you have a mage, an awakened mage, that can think about something and have it just occur. It's almost impossible, at least not without an insane amount of paradox. But these paradigms can be mechanistic, cosmos-style paradigms, a holistic or animistic approach to reality, or the belief that might makes right. Across various traditions, conventions, and crafts of mages worldwide, these views are fundamental to how the mages approach magic in general. Otherwise, they are clad in cultural beliefs on why the various elements of the paradigm work together to produce magic, or enlightened science, which is what techno-mages tend to refer to magic as. Sometimes these beliefs clash violently, which is the driving force behind the age-long conflicts between the traditions and the technocracy. Nevertheless, mages generally follow the same essential assumptions. For example, that there are 9 spheres or aspects of reality or magic instead of 22, and other mages follow more stringent paradigms in which most deviate only by virtue of specialization. Like the more science-inclined mages tend to refer to magic in more scientific ways, things like that. But moving on to things that tie into paradigms and are integral to all paradigms is foci, and practices. Especially at the beginning of a mage's awakened life, foci, instruments, or practices, magical tools, rituals, somatic, gestural, mental, or physical actions focus the mage's will. Foci are the practical expression of the mage's paradigm and how the mage turns his internal understanding into reality. Foci may be anything from personal tools of power like a staff or a wand, to the use of catalysts or magical ingredients like diamonds or coal or gold or whatever, to actions that must be performed by the mage like dancing, sex, or even martial arts, or even drug use. Inexperienced mages are often unable to perform magic without physical foci or instruments. More powerful mages still employ them quite often because it's comfortable to them, they're used to it, it's easy for them to understand. From the meta perspective, foci don't have any real power in and of themselves. It is only because the mage character believes that they need to utilize them that gives these foci power. It's important to keep in mind that when you are playing a mage, the character isn't using foci as a sort of filter that the character believes they need, because if they don't, they can't use their magic, even though they know they can use magic. That's the meta mind of the player, and it can be easy to fall into that frame of thought when playing. Always remember that your character truly believes that whatever methods they use are what give them the ability to use magic. And indeed, they might not even see it as magic at all. A fervently devout mage of any given faith might believe that their magic is the culmination of miracles given to them by their chosen deity. Or a highly intelligent geneticist that thinks they've cracked the code of the human genome and is now able to successfully alter human biology through pharmaceuticals and surgical cybernetic implants. These narrative aspects of the mage character are what help keep them more grounded from being able to just go hog wild with magic. It keeps them a bit more manageable with limits of their respective belief on how they can do magic. If your character doesn't believe they can just blatantly teleport from in a blink of an eye to long distances, then the magic that they practice isn't going to let them be able to do it, no matter how many levels of correspondence they actually have. As a player, you are encouraged to really lean into this for whatever kind of character you can come up with. And it leads to a lot of rich experiences of philosophical debate, idealism, perspectives, and really awesome role-playing overall between mages. But don't worry, as the mage grows in power and understanding of the greater realities and how to manipulate it, the more open their paradigms tend to become, which allows for broader avenues of learning, even to the point where they start to outgrow the tools that they need and practices, and even utilizing methods from other paradigms altogether. This may seem daunting, and you bet that I had to dig pretty deep to fully grasp these concepts myself in their entirety. But the great thing about tabletop role-playing games is that you can use whatever you want. There's plenty of systems out there that you can utilize and play. Different mage editions have differing systems and different interpretations on paradigms and their magic and things of that nature. And there's even some other games out there that I've heard of that have been used in mage games with great success. You can play a hard-hitting, gritty, gothic horror Magick is Tough game where reality is lurking behind every corner, like Joe Pesci with a baseball bat waiting for you to cast Fireball so you can feel the weight of your decisions and how you made lives worse with your flagrant disregard for consensus. Or a high urban fantasy where paradox is barely even a thing and you're exploring Hollow Earth on an aetherite airship, fighting off hit marks, looking to terminate reality deviants and dinosaurs. Mage is all about creativity, so get creative. I hope you guys enjoyed this explanation on Magick for Mage the Ascension and the things associated with it. There's a lot more to all of these topics that I can cover in more detail, because essentially the building blocks of Mage the Ascension as a game goes very, very deep. And I could do a video on every single one of these things individually and have a pretty good video come out of it, in my opinion. So if you want something like that, let me know and I'll see what I can do. There's all sorts of things I can cover, like combining spheres, rotes, which are like essentially like memorized spells, and you know, what paradigms are out there. Obviously, I'm going to be covering like traditions and things of that nature in the future. So I'll be talking about paradigms associated with those traditions, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of stuff in Mage the Ascension that I can do video-wise. So, you know, let me know if you're interested, and I'll do my best to put out more mage videos on top of my vampire content, which I'll be continuing here soon as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little bit of mage knowledge that I've been able to give you. I hope that I was able to be succinct enough to really kind of plant it in there for people to grasp and at least get a rudimentary understanding of what it is and what it means. And I'll see you at the next video real soon. And remember, nothing good ever happens when you piss off reality.